Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. Today I'm going to be doing the full review of the Vostok Amphibia. Now I ordered this one from the Marinom website, and it took about 2 months to arrive from Russia to Australia. And because it did take a while, I got a little bit worried. I wasn't worried about it not arriving. That's how long this watch is going to take. That's perfectly fine. But the problem is, in the past when I've ordered watches that have taken a while to arrive, I start getting a little bit more and more excited about it, and my expectations start to raise a little bit too high. And I know in the past I have been disappointed when my expectations are up here, but the watch is about here, even if the watch is pretty good. But I have to say that the watch didn't disappoint me. But that aside, I picked this particular Amphibia because I quite like the dial case combination. There are quite a few different options to pick from, but I knew I wanted the scuba dude. I was particularly wanting maybe a black dial, and I wanted to ensure that I liked the case shape. There are a few different case shapes from Vostok, and not all of them really sing out to me and make me want to buy them. However, let's jump into this review. Before I do so, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you click on that subscribe button. It's really the best and easiest way to support this channel and support me and keep me making these videos. Alright, let's jump into it. Let's do the review of this Vostok Amphibia. So I bought this from the Marinom website for 5,662 rubles, which is about 108 Australian dollars. It comes in this plastic black container, which I think it does the job quite well. I'm happy that I don't spend too much more on it. There is some paperwork that comes with the watch, and it arrives on this supplied metal bracelet. Now when you look at this bracelet, I haven't even bothered taking the plastic off it, because it's really not that great. I'd have to say the links look okay. There's a little bit of weight to it. There's a little bit of jangliness to it. But it's this clasp that really does it for me. It's not very nice. It's quite sharp. It doesn't feel particularly good. And when you open it, it just feels cheap and a little bit nasty. So I haven't been wearing it on this, obviously, as you can see, because I haven't even bothered taking the plastic off. I've been putting it on my ever-loved AliExpress bracelet. And that's how I'm going to display it to you today. Oh, that's better. It's on my AliExpress solid stainless steel bracelet now. This is how I've been wearing the watch. This is how I prefer it. So this is how I'm going to show it off through this review. Let's run through those dimensions of it, shall we? The case itself is 42mm. It's about 15.1mm wide. With this lug to lug, it's a very compact 45mm, and it has a lug width of 22mm. On the original bracelet, it weighs in at 124 grams. Now the face of this watch is a matte black, and it has a all printed dial. There's a printed minute tracker on the outside. It has a printed 12, 9 and 6, as well as you can see that Vostok, that lovely scuba dude logo, and also assume the writing down the bottom says made in Russia. So you can see the hour hand is this arrow style. We have a pencil style minute hand, and I have this nice splash of red on the dial with this loomed lollipop end. Now there's not a lot of loom on this watch. There's a couple of markings at the hours, as you can see, and a little bit of loom on both the hour, minute, and a little splash, as I mentioned, on that second hand. I'm going to throw in a loom shot now, just to show the loom to you. I'm not sure how well this would last throughout the night, but it certainly works initially. And at the 3 o'clock you can see that there is a date window, and it's surrounded by a simple printed on white border. And all of this whole dial here is covered by the fairly well-known Vostok domed acrylic crystal, which gives you those nice sort of distortions when you look at it from an angle. And of course you can't have a Vostok without having a bi-directional friction-based bezel. This one's okay. It feels a tiny little bit loose and a tiny little bit gritty. It only worries me a little bit that if it knocks it, it might move it, but it's not something that I'm going to be using to time any dives with or anything else, so I'm not too worried about it. I do like, however, that it has this little bits of red, which links in nicely with that second hand, so it ties that face together nicely. Now the bezel does have quite an interesting profile. You'll see there is quite a nice long slope from that domed acrylic crystal. It slopes down onto the bezel itself. It has this coin edge, which makes it quite easy to grip, but then it tucks back in quite far and deep in towards the case itself. Now that case is obviously full stainless steel, which is quite nice, and the whole thing is this high polish. It's quite rounded. It actually reminds me a lot of my Seiko turtle. It has that extra material around here, and the curves and the angles, or the lack of angles, it does remind me of that Seiko. I do like about this watch that the lug ends are squared off. It does mean that when you put an aftermarket bracelet or strap on this watch, that it actually looks quite good and looks like it's sort of made for the watch. The crown is quite large on this watch, which does make it very, very easy to use. Also, there's no crown guards, but for me, I think it looks a little bit too big. I think this is kind of a well-known or a well-used sort of style for Vostok, so it's not strange for this particular watch. It's just amongst all their range, but it is quite large. It is a screw-down crown. It does have manually winding. When you do manual wind though, you need to pull out very slightly to allow to manual wind. And then if you pull out one further, you can then adjust the time. And as you can see, it does not have hacking. There's also no second position or first position, whichever one you want to call it, so there's no quick set date change feature. And whilst I'm talking about the crown and the different positions, I do want to point out that once you have pulled it out to change the time, it's very hard to then get back to the manually winding feature. It just doesn't sort of work. You sort of need to wind this crown all the way back in again, and then back out again, and then now I can manually wind again. It doesn't seem to want to go from one position to the other. Well, it goes from the manual winding to changing the hands, but not the other way around. And if you look on the back, even though the whole case is polished, there are some markings inside the base of the case. Now, I don't think that's a brushing. I think that's actually just the tool marks of the cutting away of the steel so that you can make this case back. And whilst we're looking at the back, you'll see the case back here is obviously stainless steel as well. It's got a little bit of text on there. It's all in Russian. I assume that says Amphibia, since it looks like Amphibia. It looks quite good. It has that two-stage lockdown, so this case back, and there's a case back ring, and then it sort of turns on, locks it down, and gives you that water resistance. And this particular water resistance, I believe, is 200 meters. And inside we have one of the Vostok movements. Obviously, I've just shown you it has hand winding, and it's also automatic. And it also states that it has a 10-year service duration. So you don't need to get it to service until 10 years after buying the watch, which is quite good for watches. Usually you have to do a lot more often than that, so it costs you a little bit more money. But I'm quite interested to put this on the timegrapher now and see how well that movement is performing. Now, this is the first time I've had this watch on the timegrapher, and I have to say I'm a little bit impressed with the numbers there. As you can see, it's a 19,800 vibrations per hour. It has almost no beat error, has a very healthy 350 degrees of amplitude, and it's only running about +4 to +10 seconds a day. For these Vostok movements, they're generally well known to be out by up to 60 seconds a day, so I'm very happy with those numbers. And here it is on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. It's a really nice watch to wear, as it fits easily on my wrist, and because of that very short lug to lug, it really fit most wrist sizes. And looking down my arm, you'll see that it conforms to my wrist quite nicely. It really tucks in there. It looks quite nice. So what do I like, what don't I like, and what would I change? I have to say, the thing that I like the most about it is the value for money and the wearability of this one. It feels like it could be bashed around and would just keep ticking. And I do like that it has that scuba dude on the logo. It just makes it a little bit different to the other watches that I have in my collection and gives it a little bit of character. I am also a big fan of the case backs on all these Vostok watches. I think they're a little bit different. They're fairly simple, but they feel good and they're quite interesting. So what don't I like about this watch? Well, one of the complaints I have about it is the same complaint I've had with my Commanderski. It's that date window. Obviously, not being color matched makes it stand out a little bit, but also where it's positioned under that domed acrylic crystal, it distorts the actual viewing of that window and of that date itself. It doesn't make it too hard to see the date, but it does distort it a little bit. I think this would look a lot better if it just had the number 3 there, got rid of the date completely. I do know these watches do come dateless, so maybe I'll have to look into getting one of those as well to have a look at. I also do think that crown is a little bit too big. I don't think it needs to be quite that large. I probably would reduce it a little bit. I wouldn't mind seeing a slight bit of crown guards on it as well, but I guess this is the style of these watches and I'm okay with that. Also, the original bracelet that came with it, obviously I didn't like it. I didn't even bother taking the plastic off it. So let's flip back to me now, and I'm going to give you some of my final thoughts of this Vostok Amphibia. So I'm really impressed by this Amphibia. I have to say the build quality is done really well. I get that sort of tank feeling from it. I think you could throw anything at this watch and it would just keep on chugging along. And when you put it into its perspective with the price that I paid for this, it's quite an amazing watch. But is this the perfect Vostok for me? I'm not 100% sure. Possibly, possibly not. I think perhaps when I did buy it, I was being a little bit mindful of price. I hadn't owned one of these watches before, so I wanted to sort of dip my feet into the water of Vostok and just try it out. I have to say it is a very good watch. I do like it, but perhaps I might jump back onto Meranom or another Vostok related website and have a look to see if there's anything else out there that I like even more. Now that I'm quite confident that it's going to be a good watch, I'm happy to spend a little bit more money. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you joining me on this little Vostok Amphibia adventure. I hope to see you in another video.